The announcement hall of the Galactic War Academy was silent in the way only military halls could be silent. Heavy, sharp, disciplined. Hundreds of cadets from dozens of species stood beneath the towering holographic banners of the Coalition fleet, while assignment data scrolled across the massive blue display suspended above the chamber. Every cadet in the room understood what today meant. Survival deployment. 30 cadets. 30 hostile worlds. 30 chances to prove they deserve to wear the black combat insignia of the Coalition military. Or 30 opportunities to die trying. Most cadets stare at the screen with tightly controlled confidence, but the tension leaking through the room was impossible to hide. Some flexed claws. Others adjusted armor straps repeatedly. One reptilian cadet whispered a prayer beneath his breath. Then the assignment list began. Category 4. Category 5. Standard combat survival worlds. Dangerous, yes, but survivable. The room relaxed slightly with each name called, until the screen froze. A single line appeared at the bottom of the display, and the entire hall stopped breathing. Cadet Elias Mercer. Species, human. Deployment zone Nethra X9. Threat classification, Category 9. Nobody moved. For one long second, even the ventilation system seemed quieter. Then whispers exploded across the hall. A Category 9? For a human? That's not an assignment. That's an execution. At the back of the chamber, Elias Mercer remained completely still, tall by human standards, but painfully small compared to most combat species around him. He stood in the final row with his hands loosely behind his back while the reaction spread through the room like wildfire. The Varkesh cadets laughed first. Deep, barking sounds filled with open mockery. One of them turned fully toward him. Careful human, the massive reptilian sneered. You might survive long enough to disappoint everyone. Laughter spread again. Another cadet leaned closer. Maybe the planet will die from boredom before the human does. Even some instructors looked uncomfortable. Category 9 worlds were not training environments. They were nightmares. Entire military platoons disappeared on Category 9s. Autonomous survey drones failed on Category 9s. One world had dissolved an armored transport carrier in under 6 minutes because the rain itself was acidic enough to melt military steel. No Academy cadet had ever been assigned one alone, especially not a human. At the center platform near the command deck, Commander Sereth watched the room carefully. The silver-skinned Pelorian officer stood perfectly motionless with her arms folded behind her back, but her pale eyes never left the human cadet in the rear row. She had argued against this assignment for 3 straight hours. The Academy board had ignored her. The human species requested equal treatment. The board chairman had said coldly, "This is equal treatment." Sereth knew politics when she heard it. This was not equal treatment. This was a public demonstration, a message to every species in the Academy that humans did not belong here. Most humans lacked natural armor. Most lacked enhanced night vision. No claws, no venom, no exoskeleton, no secondary organs. Compared to the dominant species of the Coalition, humans looked fragile, soft, temporary, and now the board intended to prove it. Yet while the hall drowned in whispers and mockery, Elias Mercer did something strange. He smiled, not bravely, not arrogantly, just calmly, as if someone had informed him the weather might be inconvenient tomorrow. He stepped aside from the formation, opened his worn gear bag, and pulled out a tiny recording device no larger than his palm. Several cadets frowned. A recording journal? On a Category 9 deployment? Elias clicked it on. The small red light blinked. He lifted it toward his face. "Well," he said quietly, "this should make a pretty good video log." More laughter echoed across the chamber, but Elias ignored it. "Hey, Mia," he continued softly into the recorder. "Got my assignment." His voice remained steady. "Looks like they're trying very hard to kill your big brother." For the first time, Commander Sereth noticed something she had not expected. The human was not afraid. No, that was wrong. He was afraid. She could see it in the tightness around his eyes. But fear was not controlling him. That disturbed her more than panic would have. A massive insectoid cadet near the center row tilted its armored head. "You are recording messages?" it asked in disbelief. Elias shrugged lightly. My little sister likes space documentaries. The insectoid stared at him for several seconds. You expect to survive long enough to return those recordings? The hall quieted again. Everyone waited. Elias clipped the recorder back onto his chest harness. Then he answered with a small grin. Honestly, he looked up at the massive Category 9 symbol glowing above the chamber. I haven't decided yet. A few cadets laughed again, but not as loudly this time, because there was something wrong with the human's tone. Something calm, something stubborn, something that did not bend correctly under fear. Commander Seraph felt it too, and judging by the uneasy silence slowly spreading through the hall, so did everyone else. The assignment officer activated the final transport countdown. Deployment launch in 2 hours. The holographic display shifted. Images of Nethra. X9 appeared above the chamber. Black oceans. Red electrical storms. Forests so massive they swallowed mountains whole. Predator indicators flooded the display in crimson warning symbols. Atmospheric toxicity. Severe. Surface stability. Unpredictable. Known apex species, 47. Estimated human survival probability, 3%. Several cadets physically recoiled, 3%. Not even military survival simulations went that low. The room slowly turned toward Elias again, waiting, watching, expecting fear, expecting anger, expecting him to break. Instead, the human simply stared up at the planet rotating above the hall, and smiled again. Small, quiet, almost excited. Commander Seraph suddenly felt cold, because, in that moment, the human did not look like prey anymore. He looked like someone walking willingly into hell just to see what lived there. The drop pod screamed as it entered the atmosphere of Nethra. X9. Metal groaned around Elias Mercer, while fire wrapped across the viewing glass in violent orange waves. Warning alarms flashed red to the cramped cockpit, one after another, almost faster than the onboard computer could announce them. Atmospheric instability detected. Pressure fluctuations critical. Magnetic interference rising. External temperature exceeding operational recommendations. Elias tightened the straps across his chest and stared through the burning haze outside. Below him, the planet looked alive. Not metaphorically. Actually alive. Massive storm systems moved across entire continents, like hunting animals changing direction. Lightning spread sideways through black clouds and glowing red veins. Mountain ranges shifted beneath thick layers of volcanic smoke, and enormous shadows moved beneath the surface of dark oceans large enough to swallow cities whole. The pod shook violently. A warning symbol flashed. Trajectory deviation. Correcting. Correction failed. Elias sighed softly. Fantastic. He clicked on the recorder attached to his chest. The tiny red light blinked. Entry log, he said calmly. Current situation. Falling directly into the worst decision of my life. The pod dropped harder. Somewhere beneath the hull, metal snapped. Oh, that sounds expensive. The computer interrupted him immediately. Estimated human survival probability updated. 3% reduced to... Elias reached over and muted it. No negativity today. The pod punched through the cloud layer, and Nethra X9 revealed itself. Elias stopped breathing for a moment. The world below looked like the remains of a war between gods. Towering black forests stretched endlessly across shattered volcanic terrain. Rivers of glowing blue liquid carved through enormous valleys, while thunderclouds rotated unnaturally low overhead. Some of the trees rose nearly a kilometer into the sky, their branches moving slowly despite the absence of wind, not swaying, moving, like they were searching. The pod scanned the surface rapidly. Warning, large life signatures detected. Another warning appeared instantly beside it. Larger life signatures detected. Elias blinked. Well, that's concerning. Then the pod slammed into ground. The impact nearly broke his spine. Harness locks exploded open as the drop pod skidded across black volcanic stone before crashing sideways into a cluster of twisted metallic trees. Everything went silent. Smoke drifted through the cabin. Elias groaned and pushed himself upright slowly. Still alive, he muttered. He checked his arms. Bruised. His shoulder hurt. Possibly dislocated. But alive. Take that, statistics. The pod door suddenly blasted outward. Heat crashed into him instantly. Not normal heat. Heavy heat. Wet heat. The kind that crawled into lungs and stayed there. Elias stepped cautiously onto the surface of Nethra. X9. And the planet immediately tried to kill him. Gravity hit first. His knees nearly buckled. The world pressed downward with crushing force, making every piece of equipment on his body feel twice as heavy. Gravity, he gasped. Okay, wow. He forced himself upright again. Every breath felt thicker here. Harder, like the air itself resented being inhaled. The sky above him churned dark red beneath moving storm clouds while distant shrieks echoed across the jungle horizon. Not animal sounds. Something worse. Something intelligent enough to sound angry. Elias activated his wrist scanner. The device immediately flooded with warning markers. Biological contacts detected. Radius, 800 meters. 17 hostile signatures. 9 large predators. 3 unknown classifications. Then the scanner emitted a sound Elias had never heard before. A slow mechanical pulse. Warning. Apex organism detected. Distance unknown. Size unknown. Threat level unmeasurable. Elias stared at the screen. That can't be good. A deep roar rolled across the jungle. The ground vibrated beneath his boots. Something enormous moved somewhere beyond the trees. And something else answered it. Elias slowly looked toward the forest line. The trees, they were colossal. Their trunks wider than buildings. Their bark black like burned steel. Thick blue vines hung between them, pulsing faintly with bioluminescent light. Then one of the vines moved, not from wind. It reached. Elias took one careful step backward. The vine snapped toward him instantly. He dropped sideways just as the thing slammed into the rock where his head had been standing, cracking the volcanic surface open like glass. Oh, come on. The vine recoiled upward into the trees. Waiting, watching. Elias backed away carefully, breathing harder now. The jungle wasn't just dangerous. It was hunting. Everything here hunted. The plants, the weather, the ground. Even the air smelled predatory. He checked the scanner again. More warning symbols appeared every second. Something nearby was circling him. Fast. Very fast. Elias slowly unclipped the survival blade from his hip. Small weapon. Very small. Especially on this planet. Another roar erupted somewhere deeper in the forest. Closer this time. Then silence. Total silence. No wind. No movement. Nothing. And somehow that terrified him more. His instinct screamed. Run. Now. But before he could move, something exploded from the undergrowth beside him. A creature the size of a transport bike launched directly toward his throat. Too many limbs. Too many eyes. Its jaw split open sideways as it attacked. Elias reacted on instinct. He ducked low as claws ripped across the side of his backpack. The impact spun him across the volcanic rock, tearing skin from his palms. The creature landed hard, turned, charged again immediately. Fast, way too fast. Elias forced himself upright and waited. 3 seconds. 2. 1. Now. He sidestepped at the last possible moment. The creature missed him by centimeters. Elias drove the survival blade downward as it passed. The blade cut deep into the thing's side. Black blood sprayed across the rocks. The creature screamed, not in pain. In fury, it spun violently toward him again, then suddenly stopped. Its many eyes lifted toward the jungle behind Elias. The creature froze. Fear, real fear. Elias slowly turned. The forest had gone completely still. Then, something massive moved between the trees. Only for a second, a shape larger than any living thing he had ever seen. Watching him. Watching the wounded predator. Watching everything. The injured creature backed away instantly, then fled into the jungle at full speed. Elias remained motionless. His heartbeat thundered inside his chest. Because the thing in the forest had not followed, it had stayed, still watching. The scanner on his wrist glitched violently before displaying a single unreadable message. Warning, Unknown apex entity. Then the signal died completely. The jungle remained silent. Elias swallowed slowly, then clicked on his recorder again. His breathing was heavier now, more honest. "Planet update," he whispered. A distant growl echoed through the trees. Elias stared into the darkness ahead. "Everything here wants me dead." Another movement. Huge, slow, curious. Elias tightened his grip on the blade, then gave a nervous little smile. "This is officially the coolest thing that has ever happened to me. The first night on Nethra, X9 nearly killed Elias Mercer 6 different times. The second night almost felt easier, not because the planet had become less dangerous, but because Elias had started learning its rules. That was humanity's real gift. Not strength, not speed, adaptation. By day 3, Elias understood something every Academy survival manual had gotten wrong. Nethra, X9 was not chaos. It was a system, a brutal, violent, constantly shifting system, but still system. The predators hunted according to weather pressure. The forest changed movement patterns before storms. The glowing vines reacted aggressively to body heat. Even the ground itself carried warning signs if you watched closely enough. And Elias watched everything. Every sound, every smell, every movement, every near-death experience became data. The first shelter he built collapsed after underground routes shifted during the night, so he stopped building near-tree systems. The second shelter was attacked by airborne scavengers attracted to body heat, so he learned to vent thermal signatures into surrounding rock. The third shelter survived. Barely, but it survived, and so did he. Elias sat beside a tiny heat-controlled fire beneath a narrow stone overhang, while acid rain hissed across the jungle beyond. He clicked on his recorder. "Day 3, he said quietly. "Good news, I'm adapting." Lightning flashed red across the forest. Bad news, so is the planet. Thunder rolled across the mountains hard enough to shake loose dust from the rocks above him. Elias looked down at the fresh claw marks carved into his arm. Also discovered something important today. He lifted the recorder slightly. Everything here has way too many teeth. A low growl echoed somewhere far below the cliffs. Elias froze instantly. The sound was distant, but enormous. He slowly lowered the recorder. There was again, not angry, not hunting, just there, watching. The same thing from the jungle. The unseen apex creature. For 3 straight days Elias had caught glimpses of it at the edges of storms or moving between massive trees in the distance. Always too large. Always too fast. Always gone before he could focus clearly. And somehow that uncertainty frightened him more than direct attacks did. The known predators attacked. The unknown one observed. That meant intelligence. Elias hated intelligent predators. A sudden warning pulse flashed across his wrist scanner. Environmental hazard detected. He looked up. The rain had changed color. Wonderful. Elias immediately extinguished the fire and moved deeper beneath the rock overhang as drops struck the stone outside and began melting tiny smoking holes into the surface. "Acid rain," he muttered, because apparently normal weather was too boring. The storm intensified quickly. Wind screamed through the cliffs while the jungle below twisted violently beneath red lightning. Massive trees bent almost sideways as something huge moved through the canopy far beneath the storm. Not flying, climbing. The branches cracked under its weight. Elias held completely still. Then the scanner beeped again. Life signature approaching. Distance, 40 meters. Moving fast. Elias grabbed the survival blade instantly. The creature emerged seconds later. Small, thin, 6-legged. Its body resembled a cross between a wolf and an insect, with pale gray armor plating running along its spine and black reflective eyes scanning constantly for weakness. It sniffed the air, found him immediately. Elias didn't move. Neither did the creature. For several long seconds they simply stared at each other, while acid rain crashed around the cliffside. Then the animal made a strange clicking noise. Another click answered somewhere below. Then another. Elias felt cold immediately. Not a lone hunter. A pack. The scanner suddenly lit up. Multiple contacts detected. 12 hostile life forms approaching. "Oh, you gotta be kidding me." The first creature lunged. Elias rolled sideways just as claws slammed into the rock beside his head. Another attacker burst from a rain instantly. Then another. The pack attacked with terrifying coordination. One forced him left. Another cut off escape. A third waited behind him. They were hurting him, testing him, learning him. Elias barely ducked beneath snapping jaws before slamming his blade upward into one creature's throat. Black blood sprayed across the rocks as the body collapsed twitching. The others immediately changed tactics. That terrified him more than the attack itself. They adapted, just like humans did. One circled behind him, while another charged directly forward to force his attention. Smart. Way too smart. Elias grabbed a loose stone from the ground and hurled it toward the cliff wall. The predators reacted instantly toward the sound. That single hesitation saved his life. Elias sprinted between them at full speed, ignoring the pain tearing through his lungs as high gravity crushed every step. The pack chased him immediately. Fast. Relentless. He could hear claws scraping stone behind him. Closer. Closer. Then a roar shattered the night. Everything stopped. The sound rolled across the cliffs like an avalanche. Deep, ancient, violent enough to vibrate inside Elias's ribs. The predators froze instantly. Fear spread visibly through the pack. One whimpered. Another backed away. Then silence fell again. A massive shadow moved slowly beneath the storm far below the cliffs. The unseen apex predator. Watching. The hunting pack retreated immediately. Not cautiously. Not strategically. They fled. Elias stood there gasping for breath while acid rain steamed around him. The scanner on his wrist flickered violently again. Warning! Apex entity nearby. Distance unknown. The shadow below disappeared into the jungle. Gone again. Elias leaned heavily against the rocks and laughed weakly. Not because anything was funny, because adrenaline had nowhere else to go. He activated the recorder with shaking fingers. Day 3 update, he breathed. He looked down toward the jungle where the unseen creature had vanished. I think lightning flashed across the mountains. Something out there keeps saving my life. Far above Nethra, X9, inside the Galactic Academy monitoring station, Instructor Kaler stared silently at the survival feed. Around him, several officers watched the footage with growing disbelief. The human should have died yesterday, possibly twice today. Yet every time the planet cornered him, he adapted. Kaler leaned closer to the display. Pause, he ordered quietly. The footage froze on Elias standing alone in the acid storm. Tiny, fragile, exhausted, but still alive. One officer frowned. I don't understand. Kaler's eyes narrowed slightly. That, he said softly, is because you're still evaluating the human like a soldier. The officer glanced at him. What else would he be? Kaler continued staring at the frozen image on the screen. No, he murmured. Not a soldier. Lightning illuminated Elias's face in the paused footage. Calm despite the horror around him. Learning. Adjusting. Enduring. Kaler folded his arms slowly. That thing down there, he pointed toward the dark jungle behind Elias, is hunting him. The officer nodded nervously. Yes. Kaler's expression hardened. And the human, he said quietly, is starting to hunt the planet back. Day 6 on Nethra. X9 began with blood, not Elias's, which immediately made him suspicious. He crouched near the edge of a narrow ravine while thick blue fog drifted silently through the jungle below. Fresh black blood stained the volcanic rocks ahead in enormous streaks, still wet enough to reflect the crimson morning light filtering to the canopy overhead. Elias touched one of the marks carefully. Warm. Recent. Very recent. His wrist scanner flickered. Biological trail. Detected. Unknown apex organism. Elias slowly looked up. Well, he whispered, that feels like a terrible idea. Naturally, he followed it immediately. The blood trail cut through shattered jungle terrain where entire trees had been snapped apart like brittle sticks. Massive claw marks carved deep trenches through the earth while the surrounding vegetation looked crushed beneath unimaginable weight. Something enormous had fought here, and something enormous had lost. Elias moved carefully through the destruction with one hand resting on the survival blade at his hip. Every instinct he possessed screamed at him to turn around. which usually meant curiosity was about to ruin his life again. The jungle grew quieter the deeper he traveled. No predators. No movement. Even the wind seemed cautious here. Then he found the cave. The entrance stretched across the side of a black mountain ridge, half hidden beneath hanging vines and twisted roots. One side of the stone opening had collapsed inward, as if something massive had smashed directly through it. The blood trail disappeared inside. Elias stopped moving. A low sound drifted from the darkness within. Breathing. Slow. Heavy. Painful. The scanner pulsed once more. Warning. Category 9 Apex Predator. Threat level, extreme. Recommendation, immediate retreat. Elias stared at the message, then sighed. See, the problem, he muttered softly, is that your recommendations have been terrible so far. He activated the light mounted on his wrist and stepped into the cave. The temperature dropped instantly. Cool air wrapped around him as darkness swallowed the outside world behind his back. Water dripped slowly somewhere deeper inside, while strange bioluminescent fungi pulsed faint blue along the cave walls. The breathing sound came again. Closer now. Elias moved carefully around a massive stone formation and froze. The creature filled almost the entire chamber. It was enormous, larger than any predator Elias had ever seen in person. 6 heavily muscled legs pressed weakly against the stone floor, beneath a body armored in overlapping black scales that shimmered faintly blue beneath the cave light. Massive claws dug unconsciously into the rock, while 2 folded ridges along its spine pulsed with dim bioluminescence. And its eyes, deep amber eyes, locked onto Elias instantly. The apex predator from the jungle, the thing that had been watching him for days, now lying wounded before him. A deep gash tore across the creature's side, exposing damaged muscle beneath shattered armor plating. Dark blood pooled around its body in frightening amounts. Something had nearly killed it, which meant somewhere on this planet existed something even worse. Wonderful. The creature's chest rose weakly. Its breathing rattled painfully. But despite the injury, it remained terrifying. One movement from those claws could split Elias in half. One bite could remove his head entirely. The predator stared directly at him. Waiting, Elias slowly reached for the blade at his side. The creature's eyes narrowed instantly. Not fear, awareness. It understood weapons. For several long seconds, neither of them moved. Then Elias did something completely insane. He unclipped the blade and set it on the ground. The predator blinked slowly. Elias carefully removed his pack next. I know, he said quietly. That probably seemed stupid. The creature continued staring at him. I'm not actually disagreeing. Another painful breath rattled through the chamber. Elias looked down at the wound again. It was infected already. Without treatment, the predator would die, maybe in hours. The smart choice was obvious. Leave. Immediately. No academy rule required him to save alien wildlife, especially wildlife capable of eating armored vehicles. Yet Elias remained where he was, because the creature had not attacked him. Not once. It could have killed him in the jungle repeatedly. Instead, it watched, protected, warned away other predators. And now it was dying alone in a cave. Elias slowly opened his medical kit. The creature's muscles tensed immediately. It's okay, Elias murmured softly. I'm trying something called a terrible survival decision. The amber eyes followed every movement of his hands. Elias approached carefully. One step, then another. The predator's breathing deepened, but it did not attack. Elias finally crouched beside the massive wound. Up close, the creature was even larger than he realized. Its head alone outweighed him easily. Heat radiated from its body while the bioluminescent patterns beneath its scales pulsed weakly like a slowing heartbeat. The injury was catastrophic. Claw damage. Something had ripped through the armor plating with horrifying force. Elias swallowed hard. What exactly fights you? The predator blinked slowly. Elias carefully poured antiseptic across the wound. The creature jerked violently. A deep growl rolled through the cave hard enough to shake dust from the ceiling. Elias froze. The amber eyes locked onto him again. Close. So close. He could see intelligence there now. Not human intelligence. Something older, sharper, wild, but aware. Elias slowly raised both hands. "Easy," he whispered. "I know it hurts." The creature continued staring at him. Then, slowly, it relaxed. Just slightly. Elias exhaled shakily. "Thank you." He kept working, cleaning blood, removing debris, sealing torn flesh with surgical adhesive from the emergency field kit. Hours passed. Outside, thunder rolled across Nithra. X9, while red lightning illuminated the cave entrance in violent flashes. Inside, a human sat beside a monster and refused to leave. Elias talked while he worked, mostly because silence felt dangerous. "You know," he said, while wrapping sterilized bandages around part of the wound, "my academy instructors said humans weren't physically suited for military survival." The creature watched him quietly. Honestly, they were probably right. A low rumble escaped the predator's chest. Not aggressive. Different. Elias tilted his head. Was that a laugh? The creature blinked once. Elias stared at it for a second, then laughed softly himself. "Oh, this is definitely how I die." By the end of the treatment, Elias was exhausted. The medical kit was nearly empty, and somehow the predator was still alive. Its breathing had steadied. The bleeding slowed significantly. The bioluminescent glow beneath its armor had grown stronger. Elias leaned back against the cave wall with tired relief. "There," he muttered. "Congratulations." The creature slowly lifted its massive head. Amber eyes focused entirely on him. "You're officially not allowed to die anymore." The predator studied him silently for a long moment. Then something unexpected happened. Slowly, carefully, the enormous creature lowered its head onto the stone beside Elias's leg. Not threatening, not hunting, trusting. Elias stopped breathing for a second. The sheer size of the animal beside him should have terrified him. Instead, it felt strangely peaceful. Outside the cave, another distant roar echoed through the jungle. The predator beside him reacted instantly. Its head lifted, eyes alert, protective, not of itself. Of him. Elias stared. "Oh no." The creature looked at him again. Elias rubbed both hands across his face tiredly. "I made a friend, didn't I?" The predator's glowing markings pulsed softly in the darkness. And for the first time since arriving on Nithra, X9, Elias Mercer was not alone. Elias Mercer woke to the sound of growling. Deep, violent, close enough to vibrate through the cave floor beneath him. His eyes snapped open instantly. For one terrifying second, he forgot where he was. Then he saw the massive armored body curled near the cave entrance. The apex predator, alive and very angry. Another growl thundered through the chamber. Elias pushed himself upright carefully and looked past the creature toward the entrance. 3 shapes stood outside the cave. Large, lean, covered in black scaled plating that blended almost perfectly with the volcanic terrain. Predators. Not as large as the apex creature beside him, but still large enough to tear Elias apart in seconds. The scavengers paced cautiously near the cave mouth, while rain hissed across the rocks outside. Their reflective yellow eyes stayed locked on Elias. Not the wounded apex predator. The human. Weak prey. Easy prey. The massive creature beside Elias slowly rose to its feet. Every movement radiated violence. Its bioluminescent markings brightened beneath black armor plating, while a low rumble rolled through its chest. The scavengers immediately backed away. Not far, but enough. Elias watched carefully. The apex predator took one deliberate step forward. The scavengers retreated another. One hissed nervously. Another lowered itself submissively toward the ground. Elias blinked. "They're scared of you." The creature glanced back toward him briefly, then released a roar so powerful it shook loose rocks on the cave ceiling. The scavengers fled instantly, gone within seconds. Silence returned slowly. The apex predator stood motionless at the cave entrance while stormlight flashed behind its enormous silhouette. Guardian, protector, watching the jungle for threats. Watching over him. Elias stared for several long seconds before quietly activating his recorder. "Day 7, he whispered. The creature's ears twitched slightly at his voice. I have accidentally bonded with a nightmare monster. The predator looked back toward him again. Elias sighed. And honestly, he seems emotionally healthier than most Academy cadets. A low rumbling sound escaped the creature again. Not aggressive, almost curious. Elias slowly stood. Every muscle in his body protested immediately. He was exhausted, bruised, still injured from 6 straight days of survival on a planet designed by psychopaths. But alive, mostly. He carefully approached the massive creature. The predator watched him closely, but did not move away. Up close, Elias could finally see the details of the armor plating clearly. Dark scales layered perfectly across powerful muscle structures, while faint glowing patterns moved beneath the surface like slow rivers of light. Beautiful, terrifying, ancient. Elias stopped beside the creature's injured flank. The wound looked better already, healing faster than anything that size should have healed. That's mildly horrifying, Elias admitted quietly. The predator tilted its massive head slightly. Elias folded his arms. You need a name. The creature blinked slowly. I can't keep calling you terrifying apex death monster. Another low rumble. Elias thought for a moment, then smiled slightly. Bro. The creature stared at him. Yeah. Elias nodded. You look like a bro. Silence. Then the apex predator walked directly past him toward the cave exit. Elias raised an eyebrow. Oh, wow. Immediate rejection. But once outside, the creature stopped, turned, looked directly at him, waiting. Elias stared for a second. Then realization hit. You want me to follow you? The creature blinked once. Elias laughed softly. This is either friendship. He grabbed his gear bag, or the smartest hunting strategy in planetary history. Bro rumbled impatiently and started walking. Elias followed. The jungle beyond the cave had changed after the storm. Entire sections of forest had collapsed beneath flooding rivers, while steam rose from cracks in the volcanic ground. Strange glowing spores drifted through the air like floating embers. And everything moved aside for Bro. Predators disappeared into the undergrowth the moment his scent touched the wind. Even the jungle itself seemed quieter around him. Elias noticed quickly that Bro wasn't wandering randomly. He had routes, patterns, purpose. The creature avoided unstable ground before Elias even noticed it. He steered them away from poisonous water sources and led them directly towards safer terrain with frightening accuracy. At one point, Elias stopped near a glowing blue river. Water break. Bro immediately blocked his path. Elias frowned. What? The predator growled low in his chest. Elias looked at the water again. The scanner showed no toxins, but Bro remained tense. You think it's dangerous? The creature stared directly at him. Elias slowly crouched and picked up a nearby dead branch instead. He dipped it carefully into the glowing river. The branch dissolved instantly. Elias stared, then slowly looked back at Bro. Right. Bro made a softer rumbling noise. Smug. The massive predator somehow sounded smug. Elias pointed accusingly. You knew that was going to happen. Bro walked away. Elias laughed helplessly and followed him deeper into the jungle. For the first time since arriving on Nethra, X9, survival stopped feeling like pure terror. Now it felt like movement, like rhythm, like partnership. Over the next several days, the bond between them deepened naturally. Elias treated Bro's injuries every morning. Bro guarded him every night. When Elias hunted smaller creatures using traps and terrain strategy, Bro watched silently from nearby shadows. When larger predators appeared, Bro handled them violently. One attack lasted less than 4 seconds. A 6-limbed jungle predator burst from the trees toward Elias during a supply run. Bro intercepted it midair. The impact sounded like a vehicle collision. The attacker never touched the ground alive. Elias stared at the remains. Bro calmly returned beside him as if nothing unusual had happened. I am choosing not to think about how strong you are. Bro nudged his shoulder gently. Elias nearly fell over. Okay, also choosing not to think about that. At night, they rested beside controlled heat fires hidden beneath cliff overhangs or dense root systems. Elias talked constantly during those quiet hours. About Earth, about academy life, about his little sister Mia. Bro listened, actually listened. The creature reacted to emotional tone changes, recognized repeated names, and slowly began responding to certain words. Stop. Bro stopped. Come here. Bro came immediately. Danger. Instant alertness. By day 12, Elias realized something impossible. Bro understood language. Not perfectly, but enough. The realization genuinely unsettled him. You are way smarter than anybody knows, Elias whispered one night. Bro rested beside the fire with his glowing markings pulsing slowly beneath the darkness. The creature lowered his massive head onto Elias's lap carefully. Trust. Absolute trust. Elias slowly scratched beneath the armored ridge near Bro's jaw. The predator emitted a deep vibrating rumble. Purring. The apex death monster was purring. Elias stared down at him in disbelief. Nobody is ever going to believe this. Far above Nethra, X9, inside the Academy command station, they absolutely believed it, because they were watching everything. And every officer in the room had stopped speaking hours ago. Commander Sarah stood silently before the massive observation screen, while footage played of Elias sitting beside the apex predator beneath stormlight. Human and monster, together, peacefully. One science officer finally broke the silence. This cannot be natural. No, Sarah said quietly. Her silver eyes never left the screen. It's human. Day 16 began with silence. Not normal silence. Wrong silence. The jungle of Nethra, X9 was never truly quiet. There were always distant roars, shifting trees, clicking predators, storms growling beyond the horizon. But this morning, nothing. No movement. No wind. Even the glowing insects drifting through the upper canopy had disappeared. Elias Mercer stood near the edge of a rocky cliff, while Bro remained unusually tense beside him. The apex predator's glowing markings pulsed faster beneath his black armored scales, and his amber eyes scanned the jungle constantly, watching, searching, uneasy. Elias noticed immediately. You feel it too. Bro released a low rumble. The scanner on Elias's wrist flickered violently with static, before suddenly displaying a warning across the screen. Planetary event detected. Then another message replaced it instantly. Seek shelter immediately. Elias stared. That seems bad. The ground trembled beneath his boots. Far across the horizon, the sky changed color. Dark red clouds twisted together into a massive rotating wall stretching across nearly half the visible atmosphere. Lightning exploded sideways with storm and blinding chains, while the wind hit the jungle hard enough to flatten entire sections of forest instantly. Then Elias heard it. Not thunder. Something deeper. The sound of an entire world becoming violent. Bro moved immediately. The creature turned sharply toward the northern cliffs and roared once. Not anger. Urgency. Move. Elias guessed. Bro took off instantly. Elias sprinted after him. The storm hit faster than anything Elias had ever seen. Trees snapped behind them like breaking bones, while hurricane-force winds tore through the jungle canopy overhead. Rain began seconds later, except it wasn't normal rain. The first drop struck a nearby boulder and melted directly through solid volcanic rock. Oh, that is cheating. Bro accelerated. Elias forced his exhausted legs to keep moving as high gravity and brutal terrain tried desperately to drag him down. The storm swallowed the world behind them. Lightning slammed into the jungle repeatedly, igniting entire sections of forest in explosions of blue flame. Massive predators fled in every direction to the chaos, while the ground itself cracked open beneath growing seismic pressure. The planet was tearing itself apart, and it was winning. Bro leapt across a collapsing ravine. Elias barely made the jump behind him, never doing that again. Bro didn't slow. Ahead, Elias finally spotted it. A narrow cave entrance hidden beneath shattered cliffside stone. Shelter. Maybe. Hopefully. Bro squeezed through first. Elias dove inside seconds before the storm fully hit the mountain. The impact sounded like the end of the world. The cave shook violently while acid rain hammered the cliffs outside hard enough to melt stone into steaming rivers. Wind screamed through narrow openings deeper inside the mountain, while distant thunder rolled continuously without pause. Elias collapsed against the cave wall, breathing hard. Bro stood near the entrance, guarding, always guarding. You know, Elias gasped between breaths. I'm beginning to suspect this planet may not like visitors. Bro rumbled softly. The cave system stretched deeper underground than Elias expected. Massive stone tunnels twisted downward into darkness, while strange glowing crystals illuminated parts of the walls in pale blue light. Safe enough. For now. Elias checked supplies quickly. Minimal food. Half-charge scanner. Medical supplies nearly gone. Fantastic. Bro suddenly froze. Every muscle in the massive predator's body tightened instantly. Elias noticed at once. What is it? Bro lowered his head toward the cave floor, listening. Then Elias heard it too. Scratching. Below them, a slow clicking sound echoed upward through cracks in the stone beneath their feet. One scratch became several, then dozens. The scanner activated automatically. Multiple hostile contacts detected. Location below surface. Estimated number. Unknown. Oh no. The cave floor exploded upward. Creatures poured from beneath the stone in a horrifying wave of claws and pale armored bodies. They were smaller than Bro but moved terrifyingly fast, with elongated limbs and jaws that split vertically into rows of hooked teeth. Underground predators. Driven upward by the planetary storm. And starving. The first creature launched directly toward Elias's throat. Bro intercepted it instantly. The impact shattered stone. Another predator lunged from the side, while two more climbed directly across the cave walls toward them with insect-like speed. There were too many. Way too many. Elias ignited an emergency flare and swung it wildly as the burning light forced several attackers backward. One creature still broke through, and Elias slammed the survival blade upward beneath its jaw. Black blood sprayed across his face. Another predator tackled him immediately. Claws ripped through his shoulder armor and drove him hard into the cave wall. Pain exploded through his ribs. The creature screamed directly into his face. Then Bro tore it apart. The apex predator became pure violence. He crashed into the swarm like an avalanche of claws, armor, and rage, ripping attackers apart faster than Elias could track. The cave shook beneath his roars while glowing blue patterns exploded brighter across his scales. But the underground predators kept coming, wave after wave, driven insane by hunger and storm pressure. Elias stabbed another attacker through the eye before being slammed sideways by a second creature crashing into his chest. Something cracked. Ribs. Definitely ribs. Wonderful. He hit the ground hard. The predator immediately lunged for his throat. Elias raised the blade. Too slow. Then Bro appeared above him. The apex predator caught the attacker midair in his jaws. The sound of bones breaking echoed through the cave. Bro positioned himself directly over Elias afterward, massive armored bodies shielding the injured human completely, while snarling predators circled around him in the darkness, protecting him, even wounded, even outnumbered, protecting him. Elias struggled to breathe beneath the pain in his chest. Blood soaked through the side of his survival suit. Bro bled too now. Deep claw marks cut across his flanks, while black blood dripped onto the cave floor beneath him. The remaining predators hesitated. Bro roared. Not fear, not warning. A declaration. Mine. The underground swarm finally retreated. One by one, they disappeared back into the cracks beneath the cave floor until silence slowly returned. Elias collapsed fully against a stone, gasping painfully. Everything hurt. Bro immediately turned toward him. The apex predator lowered his massive head carefully against Elias's chest, checking, making sure he was alive. Elias laughed weakly despite the pain. You giant emotional lizard. Bro rumbled softly. Elias reached up with shaking fingers and rested his hand against the creature's armored jaw. You saved me again. Bro's glowing markings pulsed rapidly. Worried, Elias realized suddenly, Bro was scared. Not for himself. For him. The thought hit harder than the broken ribs. Elias slowly activated the recorder, clipped to his damaged armor. The tiny red light blinked weakly. Day 16, he whispered painfully. Blood stained the corner of his mouth. Planet update. Another distant roar echoed somewhere deep beneath the mountain. Elias closed his eyes briefly. Everything's still trying to kill us. Bro curled around him immediately, enormous body forming a protective wall of armor and warmth between Elias and the darkness beyond. The apex predator rested his head beside the human carefully, watching every tunnel, every shadow, every sound. Elias looked weakly toward the recorder again. They wanted this planet to break me, he murmured softly. Bro's glowing eyes remained fixed on the darkness. Elias smiled faintly despite the pain. Instead, lightning shook the mountain overhead. The storm raged across the world outside. But deep beneath Nethra, X9, human and monster remain alive together. It gave me a pack. Day 30 arrived beneath a blood-red sunrise. For the first time since Elias Mercer landed on Nethra, X9, the planet seemed calm. No screaming storms. No collapsing jungle. No predators hunting through the fog. Just a silence. Ancient. Watching. Elias stood atop a ridge of black volcanic stone, overlooking endless forests stretching beneath the crimson dawn, while cold wind moved slowly through his torn survival jacket. He barely recognized himself anymore. The Academy cadet who arrived here 30 days ago was gone. Nethra, X9 had carved him apart and rebuilt him into something harder. His body carried fresh scars across both arms and chest. He had lost weight. His movements were slower now, more careful, more efficient. But his eyes had changed most of all. Sharper, steadier, survivor eyes. Bro stood beside him silently. The apex predator's wound had fully healed, except for a massive scar running across one armored flank. Blue bioluminescent patterns pulsed softly beneath black scales, while morning light reflected across amber eyes fixed on the horizon. Waiting, Elias scratched gently beneath Bro's jaw ridge. Well, he said quietly, if the shuttle doesn't show up, I'm blaming you somehow. Bro rumbled softly. Elias smiled. Then the sky screamed. A coalition extraction shuttle tore through the atmosphere overhead, engines blazing across the clouds as it descended rapidly toward the jungle below. Finally, rescue. The shuttle landed hard in a clearing roughly half a kilometer away, flattening sections of jungle beneath the force of its engines. Elias exhaled slowly. It's time. Bro tilted his massive head slightly. The creature understood tone now. Emotion, meaning. Elias rested one hand against the armored side of Bro's neck. I'm not leaving you here. Bro's glowing markings brightened slightly. Together, they started walking toward the clearing. Inside the shuttle, Extraction Officer Varen prepared for disappointment. Category 9 retrieval missions almost always ended the same way. Bodies. Sometimes partial bodies. Occasionally nothing at all. The human cadet survival feed had gone dark hours earlier during the planetary storm interference, and Varen fully expected to recover remains. He grabbed the standard recovery kit, medical stretcher, emergency trauma supplies, and a body bag. Then movement appeared near the treeline. Varen froze. Two figures emerged slowly from the jungle. The first was human, alive, barely, thin, scarred, exhausted, but walking under his own power. The second figure stepped from the shadows beside him. Varen's blood turned cold instantly. The recovery kit slipped from his hands. No! The apex predator walked calmly at Elias's side, massive, armored, bioluminescent markings glowing beneath black scales. A Category 9 apex organism, one of the deadliest creatures ever recorded by coalitions and xenobiology, walking beside the human like a loyal guardian. Varen ripped his sidearm free immediately. Cadet Mercer, he shouted. His voice shook despite military training. Step away from creature. Elias stopped walking. Bro stopped instantly beside him. The apex predator's amber eyes locked onto Varen. Not aggressive. Worse. Evaluating. Intelligent. Elias sighed tiredly. First, he called back, his name is Bro. Varen tightened his grip on the weapon. That thing is classified as an extinction-level predator. Bro growled softly. The sound vibrated to the clearing like distant thunder. Varen took an involuntary step backward. Elias placed one hand gently against Bro's neck. He's not going to hurt you. The officer stared in disbelief. That creature could tear through the shuttle. Yeah, Elias admitted. Probably. Bro looked mildly offended. Elias glanced upward. Sorry, you probably could. Bro rumbled softly. The officer's expression shifted from fear to complete confusion. What exactly was he witnessing? Elias resumed walking slowly toward the shuttle. Bro matched his pace perfectly. Every instinct Varen possessed screamed to fire immediately. But the creature wasn't hunting, wasn't threatening, wasn't acting like any predator Varen had ever seen. It stayed beside the human. Protective, calm, pack behavior. Impossible. Elias finally stopped a few meters away from the shuttle ramp. I'm boarding, he said simply. Bro stood beside him. And so, is he? Varen stared. Absolutely not. Elias folded his arms. Then I guess neither of us are leaving. The standoff lasted 3 hours. 3 exhausting hours beneath the red skies of Nethra. X9, while military command, argued remotely through shuttle communications. Protocol forbade transporting unidentified apex fauna. Protocol also had absolutely no rules covering emotionally bonded Deathworld monsters. Finally, another shuttle descended through the atmosphere overhead. Commander Sarah stepped onto the volcanic surface personally. The moment the gravity hit her, she understood why survival rates on Nethra. X9 were nearly non-existent. The planet felt hostile. Heavy, wrong, and somewhere beyond the jungle, things roared loud enough to shake the air itself. Sarah approached carefully. Bro immediately moved between her and Elias. The apex predator lowered his massive head slightly, watching her, judging her. The commander stopped walking. Every military instinct she possessed screamed danger, not because the creature wanted violence, because it clearly understood violence and chose restraint. That was infinitely more unsettling. Sarah looked toward Elias. How are you alive? Elias considered the question seriously, then glanced sideways at Bro. Mostly him. Bro's glowing markings pulsed softly. Sarah studied them both silently for several moments. Human and monster, together, impossible, and yet standing directly before her. Finally, she exhaled slowly. What exactly did you do out here, Cadet Mercer? Elias rested his hand against Bro's neck again. His answer came quietly. I stayed. The commander frowned slightly. When it would have been safer to run, Elias continued. When it would have been smarter to abandon him. Bro leaned gently into the touch. Elias smiled faintly, and he stayed too. Silence settled over the clearing. Then Sareth made the decision that would change galactic history. She turned toward the shuttle crew, opened the cargo bay fully. Varen blinked in disbelief. Commander, that creature boards with a cadet. Nobody argued further, because deep down, everyone already understood something terrifying. The human had accomplished something no species in recorded coalition history had ever achieved. Not domination, not control, not taming. Something worse. Friendship. The return flight lasted 6 hours. 6 quiet hours inside the cargo bay while Elias sat against Bro's massive side, exhausted beyond words. The apex predator rested beside him calmly, while engine lights reflected across glowing blue scales. Commander Sareth watched from across the bay the entire time, watching human and monster breathe in the same rhythm, watching absolute trust exist where science claimed it could not. At one point, Elias drifted half asleep against Bro's shoulder. The apex predator carefully adjusted position beneath him to make the human more comfortable. Sareth looked away afterward, because something about that moment unsettled her more than any battlefield ever had. When the shuttle finally docked with the Galactic Military Academy, thousands were waiting. Cadets, officers, scientists, commanders. Every corridor overlooking the docking bay overflowed with silent spectators. Word had spread everywhere. The cargo door lowered slowly. Elias walked out first, scarred, thin, alive. Then Bro emerged behind him. The entire docking bay froze. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Even hardened war veterans stared in open disbelief as the apex predator walked calmly beside the human through the center of the station. Not chained, not restrained, choosing to remain beside him. And for the first time in coalition history, the galaxy looked at humanity differently. Not weak, not soft, not fragile. Terrifying, because only one kind of species walks willingly into the deadliest place in existence, and comes back with the monsters walking beside them. The Galactic Military Academy auditorium had never been this full. Every level overflowed with cadets, commanders, scientists, diplomats, and military observers from dozens of species across Coalition space. The air itself felt heavy with anticipation, while thousands of conversations died instantly the moment Commander Sarah stepped onto the central platform. Behind her, the massive display screen illuminated slowly. One image filled the room. A human sitting beside a Category 9 apex predator beneath the storms of Nethra. X9. Silence swallowed the auditorium. Nobody could stop staring at it. Commander Sarah spoke only once. Play the footage. The screen came alive. Day 1. Elias Mercer stepping from the drop pod into hell itself, while red storms consumed the horizon. His calm voice echoed through the hall. Current situation. Falling directly into the worst decision of my life. A few nervous laughs spread through the audience. Then the footage continued. The jungle attacks, the acid storms, the collapsing terrain, the endless predators. Cadets who once mocked humans watched silently now as the fragile species adapted to horrors that would have broken trained soldiers from stronger races. Every near-death experience became learning. Every failure became survival. Every mistake became evolution. Commander after commander stopped taking notes, because eventually the footage stopped looking like survival training and started looking like something else entirely. Persistence. Then came day 6. The cave. The wounded apex predator. The auditorium grew perfectly still. Thousands watched Elias set down his weapon beside a creature capable of tearing him apart instantly. They watched him choose compassion over fear. They watched him stay. One xenobiologist whispered quietly from the upper levels, "This is impossible." No one answered, because none of them could explain what happened next. The footage showed Bro allowing the human closer, allowing treatment, allowing trust. And then, the moment that changed everything, Bro resting his massive armored head beside Elias for the first time, choosing him. The entire auditorium remained silent, not because they were confused anymore, because they understood. The footage accelerated through the following weeks. Human and monster hunting together, surviving together, protecting each other, sleeping beside the same fire. The cave battle during the planetary superstorm. Bro shielding Elias beneath his own body. Elias treating Bro's wounds afterward despite barely remaining conscious himself. Again and again the footage repeated the same impossible truth. Neither one abandoned the other. By the time the recording reached extraction day, many cadets were openly staring at the screen in disbelief. Others looked disturbed, not frightened of Bro, frightened of humanity, because the footage forced every species in the coalition to confront a terrifying realization. Humans did not survive because they were stronger. They survived because they formed bonds with things stronger than themselves. The final scene played. The docking bay. Bro walking willingly beside Elias into the Academy station. No restraints. No fear. Just trust. The screen faded black. Silence remained. Long. Heavy. Emotional. Commander Sarah stepped back to the center podium slowly. Her silver eyes moved across the audience. Then she spoke the words that would spread across the galaxy within hours. Cadet Elias Mercer has achieved the highest survival score in Academy history. A murmur rolled through the hall instantly. Not the highest human score. The highest score. Period. Commander Sarah continued. No species has ever survived 30 days on a Category 9 world without military support. The screen behind her illuminated again. A still image appeared of Elias asleep beside Bro beneath the glowing storms of Nethra. X9. And no species, Sarah said quietly, has ever bonded willingly with a Category 9 apex organism. The audience stared silently at the image. Human, monster, pack. One young cadet finally whispered the question everyone in the galaxy had begun asking. What exactly are humans? No one answered, because the answer was already standing inside the station. Elsewhere aboard the Academy, Elias sat quietly in a maintenance hangar beside Bro, far away from the crowds and ceremonies. The apex predator rested peacefully across half the room while mechanics and terrified researchers observed from safe distances outside the blast doors. Elias scratched gently beneath Bro's jaw. "You know," he murmured softly, "you're causing a lot of paperwork." Bro purred. The sound vibrated through the metal floor beneath them. Elias laughed quietly. Then the hangar doors opened. Nerith entered slowly, the same alien cadet who once mocked him publicly before deployment, the same cadet who called humans weak. She stopped several meters away from Bro immediately. Smart decision. The apex predator opened one amber eye lazily, watching her, evaluating. Nerith swallowed carefully before looking back toward Elias. "How?" she asked softly. One word. But Elias understood the real question. How did a weak species accomplish the impossible? How did a human survive hell? How did a monster become family? Elias leaned back against Bro's armored side thoughtfully. Then he answered simply, "I stayed." Nerith frowned slightly. Elias looked down at Bro. "When he was hurt, I stayed." Bro's glowing markings pulsed softly. "When I was scared, he stayed." The room remained silent. Elias smiled faintly. "That's what humans do." Nerith stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly, carefully, she lowered her head, a gesture of deep warrior respect among her species. Not for a conqueror, not for a killer, for someone worthy. She left without another word. Hours later, Elias finally uploaded all 30 days of footage onto the Galactic Network. Unedited, raw, honest. He gave it a simple title. 30 days on Nethra, X9 with my friend. Within one standard cycle, it became the most viewed recording in galactic history. Entire worlds watched together. Soldiers, children, scientists, predators, prey species, governments. Every civilization in coalition space witnessed the same impossible truth unfold before their eyes. A fragile species with no claws, no armor, no venom, had walked onto the deadliest world ever discovered, and instead of conquering its monsters, had befriended them. Back inside the hangar, Bro shifted closer beside Elias and rested his enormous head gently against the human's shoulder. Safe, calm, trusting, Elias closed his eyes briefly. For the first time in 30 days, he no longer listened for danger. The galaxy, however, listened very carefully, because humanity had revealed something ancient and terrifying about itself. Not their violence, not their resilience, something far more dangerous. A human could look at a nightmare and see a friend, and somewhere deep inside the minds of every species watching the footage, the same realization slowly took root. The deadliest species in the universe was the one capable of making monsters feel safe.